Welcome to our chat for October. And I want to introduce you all to someone that you probably already know, but her name is Valerie, and she is the founder of Black Girl Florists. And one of the most impressive things that she's done in the past few months is now she is the owner of a new studio in Atlanta. And this studio, I know I see everybody clapping. I mean, this is so amazing. I can't wait for my next trip to Atlanta because I want to see it in person. Valerie has created a studio in Atlanta called Pink and Blooms. You can see it on Instagram at Pink and Blooms. And it is a collective, basically, for lack of a better term, but it is a place where florists can come together to do their work, to store their flowers in a cooler, to process their flowers, to design. And it looks gorgeous from just seeing it on the photos. And I know Valerie's there now. And so she has created this really interesting group, this feeling of community in not only through Black Girl Florists, but now through Pink and Blooms. And she's also a freelance floral designer herself. So she has a lot of experience as a freelance floral designer. And I think coming from the perspective of having done her own events, having done freelance for other designers, and now owning this studio that is basically a welcoming point for florists all over the Atlanta area to come and work. I think Valerie has a very unique perspective to share on this topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is freelancing. And for any of you who don't know me, my name is Lou Ann Dixon, and I am the founder of EveryStem. EveryStem is a software for florists who love to price for a profit. EveryStem is something that has been in the world for about 2.5 years. We have hundreds of members who use EveryStem to price and build recipes for their flower arrangements so that they know they're going to be profitable on every event. I have also owned my own flower shop for over 12 years. It was called Verbena Floral Design. And I sold it almost 5 years ago now, which is kind of mind-blowing to me how long it's been. But it's still there in Central Austin and with a new owner. And it's doing really well. And after I sold Verbena Floral Design, I started to freelance myself. So I've actually been a freelancer for over 5 years now. So being able to freelance and run a business is so great. It gives me flexibility. And having owned a business myself in the past, which was a retail shop, we did weddings, we did events, kind of giving me that dual perspective as well. So I think this is going to be a great conversation because we're not only going to talk about from the freelancer perspective, we're going to also talk about from the business owner perspective and see how we can kind of come to a place, and I'm going to use Valerie's words, where we kind of formalize freelancing. We start to really understand that freelancing isn't just a one-line text, hey, can you come to work tomorrow? Kind of a relationship. We want to kind of make it a little bit more formal. That way, the business owners and the freelancers, everyone gets what they need out of the situation. So we enjoy the experience. Everyone's upfront and communicative, and that we all kind of want to keep coming back, and it's a win-win situation. So Valerie, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
I'm so glad to be here. I really enjoy freelancing, and I feel like it's one of the best ways that I've been able to expand my talent.
That's amazing. So I know we've talked a little bit about this, and a couple of months ago, we had you on one of our group community chats, and we were talking about really finding your unique self in floral design. And that conversation was amazing because you gave such great points about really being able to figure out not only who you are as a florist for designers who maybe are struggling. Do I want to change what I'm doing? Or do I want to break into this industry of floral design and figure out what my career is going to look like? And that is on our blog at everystem.com. If you guys go to the blog, you'll see, I think it's maybe the second blog down. And there's a whole replay of the video and some highlights of that conversation. And in that conversation, towards the end, when we did our question and answer, we really started getting into freelancing and some of the kind of questions that a lot of the people that were on that call had. So Valerie and I just felt like that conversation was really unfinished. We wanted to continue that conversation, and that's why we're here today. So some of the things that we had talked about in that last conversation was really kind of understanding as a freelancer how you can put your best foot forward to start working with different floral companies. And so, Valerie, I'd love you to kind of go over a little bit of how you do that with the companies that you work for.
Okay, excellent. So for me, I typically start in the event floralscape because that's where I've seen that a lot of florists need the most help when it comes to freelancing. So I will reach out to florists locally and let them know, hey, I'm available for freelance. These are some of the things that I can do and that I love to do. Let me know if you need assistance. Because the thing is that a lot of florists, we all are florists, right? Most of us on the call, we keep those emails and we archive them and then we refer back to them later. And we're like, okay, we know that someone is available to help. We'll reach out and then we'll share the information about the event. And then hopefully they'll come and freelance. I think when it comes to freelance generally, it's good to understand that, we already use our flower power in different capacities. So we know that florists need assistance in different capacities. My biggest suggestion is to start freelancing in an area that you want to grow in or that you want more information about. So for example, if you know that you aspire to work in a retail shop, offer your talents to retail florists. I am a cold call girl. I'm okay with walking in a shop and introducing myself because I'm a full extrovert. But like when I first started in floral, I would walk into flower shops and see what they have going on and let them know that I'm available to help. So I'll leave my information and I'm like, hey, I know that you have a busy season coming up. I'm available because they take that into consideration that you took the effort to stop by. But nowadays you don't have to, right? You can if you want to locally, but you can also reach out to florists online. But when you're thinking about what area, like for example, if I wanted to focus on retail, I would then think, okay, when is a busy season for retail? The holidays in a retail shop. You have Valentine's Day, they're probably pushing out anywhere between 50 and 500 arrangements on that Valentine's Day week. So lending your talents to support there, and you can learn how the inner workings of a flower shop. But if you're looking to take more of the event approach or more of the corporate approach, you would look to work with florists who are already working in those areas. And that way you can learn the inner workings of events.
I love that. I think that it's really important to understand, building a network, I think, is one of the key things about being a freelancer. And I think it depends on what the freelancer needs. So I feel like when we're trying to kind of think about how we're going to go ahead and, really build those connections, it's really important to kind of express what you need and what you want to do as you work into floral design. So don't be afraid about kind of explaining to the florist that you're going to be working for, this is what I'm interested in doing, this is what I'm really care about, and expressing your availability and really expressing what you are expecting from freelance. Is this something that you want to make your full-time career where you need to be working Tuesday through Saturday? Is this something that's a supplemental job to another income source that you have where you're willing to work maybe 2 or 3 days a week? Or is it something where you just want to go out and do strikes on a Saturday night and make a little extra money? So really expressing where you're coming from. And that can change throughout the seasons too. So really kind of giving the florist the opportunity to kind of know what you expect, and setting those expectations up front can be really good. And I know Valerie typically kind of introduces herself, with some examples of her work, things that she really likes to do. So Valerie, let's say, the most recent florist that you kind of started freelancing for, how did you go through that process? Did you reach out to them? Did they reach out to you? Like what was that experience like? Maybe giving us an example would be really helpful for the group to just kind of walk through something like that.
Yeah, for sure. The person that I freelance with a couple of different florists in Atlanta and sometimes in different states, depending on where the event is. But it really started as a mutual relationship. So helping each other with events. and understanding, okay, I need help with processing and I need help with personals. So letting them know, hey, I'm available to do that, and vice versa. I think what has really helped me is that we work together. Our events don't line up and then they'll overlap. So we're able to support each other when it comes to working. So that's pretty much where I get started, just working with the florists that I know and that I built relationships with. And that in turn allows me to build relationships with other freelancers, because I've met other freelancers while I'm working at events who are like, hey, I've seen you work. Are you available for this date? And it just kind of continues to grow in that way.
I love that organic way of kind of building
Yeah.
relationships is so good. And I think we do that. I was actually I Instagram message back and forth with a florist friend of mine who is in the UK, and her name's Rachel. She owns a business called the Botanic Business Hub. She does a lot of virtual admin work for other florists. And she sent me a message and she said, it's a really small world. I was freelancing the other day and I was talking to this person and they said, what's the name of your business? And she said, oh, it's the Botanic Business Hub. I freelance and I'm an admin. And they said, oh, I've messaged with you before, and you're
Oh,
the one that
nice.
turned me on to using EveryStem, and EveryStem is so helpful and I love it. So it's kind of amazing. They're over in the UK and they're talking about EveryStem and they happen to be freelancing together, right? So it's such a small world. You just really, it's unbelievable how we are really, that 7 degrees of separation. So if we just keep networking and talking and leveraging each other's resources, we can all get the work done. And along with what you just said, Valerie, I think I've really found it interesting because when I owned my flower shop, I never did this. Mostly probably because I had a retail shop that really it was open 6 days a week, and my focus was being there, and kind of didn't really give me a lot of opportunity to go freelance for other designers while I was working in my retail shop. But after I sold my retail shop and started freelancing for other designers, I realized that a lot of designers will trade work. If you're a studio florist and you're working and you have 2 events in October, and another studio florist has 2 events in October and they happen to be on different weekends, trading and freelancing for each other and trading hours is a great way to do it. And I know a few of my friends, Jennifer, who owns Pollen Floral Art, and Kaylee, who owns Wild Heart Floral, they've been doing this for years, just trading hours back and forth. And, that's not always something that you can do, but it can be a really interesting thing. You're just like, I worked for you for 10 hours last week. You come work for me for 10 hours this week. So I think those kind of thinking out of the box ways of networking and freelancing for each other can be really interesting. And just on that general kind of, okay, how do we build these networks? I know you've mentioned staffing companies in the past, kind of having some staffing companies in your back pocket, having some outside resources other than really truly experienced floral designers to kind of help with some of the work that's not necessarily floral design, because so much of our actual work is really more physical labor, manual labor, than it is actual floral design. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about your experience with staffing companies and how you kind of figured out, hey, I could use a staffing company to get some of this work done.
Yeah, definitely. So typically, whether I'm doing like a retail session, so now that I have a space, I'll do pop-ups where people can come and purchase arrangements. It'll be like 2 recipes. They can pre-order online and then either pick it up or have it delivered. So that requires its own planning process, and then events do as well. So I personally structure my teams for events differently because we know flowers is the last part, right? It's always like, okay, we want to see the finished product, but there's so many steps that lead up to it. And it's important to understand what assistance do you truly need. So typically I have freelancers who assist just with processing or just with personals or just on site. I always have a lead designer when I do events, and I typically do like a mock-up or like one piece, and then the team finishes the rest of the pieces while I'm making sure that everything else is where it's supposed to be. So if I have a freelance team, that's like my base, I will supplement with a staffing agency to assist with any of the other pieces like placing candles, setup of the vessels and hard goods, breakdown, things that can be easily done that don't cut into the design piece. And that pretty much makes up my whole team. And it also depends on how large the event is as well.
Right. I think obviously some of the biggest things that I've seen that our business owner, floral design members of EveryStem struggle with is getting that reliability of a team when you need them, on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but then not having maybe the ability to hire full time or to have people kind of coming in all the time. And so I know what they're seeing, what a lot of our members are seeing. And if anybody's, on the call right now and you have questions about this, jump in or pop it in the chat. But, figuring out how to balance that need of, okay, I'm trying to find people who want to work, who are capable, who are able, who are reliable, but then also I don't need these people all the time. So it's not enough income to really drive that freelancer need, and they're looking for other opportunities as well. So I think one of the things that I've learned over the years with that is having some different resources to go to. And when I had my flower shop, one of the best things that ever happened to me was one of my friends who worked at the wholesaler had a cousin who was in the UT accounting department. I'm located in Austin, Texas, and UT is a giant university here. So she started talking to me about, I'd love to do some flower stuff on Saturday, or I'd love to just be involved with flowers in some way because my accounting job is so boring. And I was like, okay, well, let's talk about how we could get you involved. So she started freelancing for me and doing some pickups on Saturday nights. And then her friends who worked in the accounting department were like, well, what about me? I want to do this too. And I want to do this too. So all of a sudden I had this network of people who really wanted a creative outlet or something fun to do and make some extra money on a Saturday, but they were working in a full-time job. So they didn't need to be paid 5 days a week. They were really looking just for a supplemental income. So don't be afraid to kind of look outside of the floral design world for some of the people who can help you, because most of these people who are really looking for a creative outlet, they're actually some of them can really pick up things very quickly and learn and do some basic design for you. So if you can find some people who are outside of the normal kind of like, I need to hire a floral designer mindset, hire somebody who just wants to be there and wants to learn, and then teach them some of the basic tips and tricks. And one of the people that I think is really great at this, who is an EveryStem member, is Courtney of Coneflower Designs. And if you guys aren't following Courtney, I really highly recommend that you do, because she sends out amazing reels about how she organizes her business and how she really has a team of young women who, some of them are in high school, some of them are in college. They're not full-time employees. A lot of them are either part-time or freelance. And she organizes her business to a point where everybody that walks in can really figure out how to get the job done without a lot of direction. Everything is labeled, everything is organized. She uses EveryStem for all of her recipes. She uses Honeybook for all of her proposals. And she has a very, very organized business. And I think she also has like a subscription on Instagram, but you can just follow her for free on Instagram. It's Coneflower Designs. And being organized on the front end can really make the freelancers want to come back. So as a freelancer, I think, Valerie, you and I have talked about this in the past. I want to work for somebody who's organized, who has the recipes already figured out, who knows how to process their flowers and kind of can guide me on what they like and what they don't like. And even for someone who maybe hasn't been in the industry very long, you can figure it out as you go. We're all going to work together, but kind of try to think ahead and prepare ahead so that the freelancer really can enjoy the experience and wants to come back. Even if there's somebody who isn't an experienced floral designer, they're like, okay, I learned something today. I enjoyed myself and I want to return. I think that can kind of go on from both ends of the business owner and the freelancer kind of perspective. Do you have anything to add to that, Valerie, or anybody else have any questions about that? Kat just sent a chat that says, Courtney is awesome. Yes, she really is. I think if you guys aren't following Courtney at Coneflower, you should check her out. She also has a second business that's called Simply Cone that's all about a la carte florals. So if anybody's interested in doing some a la carte floral design for weddings or events, check out that website. It's so good. Okay. And so I think it's really important to think about one of the things that Valerie said earlier when we were talking about this is that when you're a freelancer, you want to understand that you're sharing your skill set and that you need to manage your expectations as well. So what we've both seen in the past is a lot of freelancers will come in with very little experience, but they want to do something that's way above their experience level. And I think that can lead to a lot of miscommunication between designers and or freelancers and business owners. So Valerie, I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit, your experience with that, and kind of your recommendations for florists who are looking to freelance and maybe really feel like they want that experience. And so they're expecting to get all this hands-on experience when they go freelance, but maybe the floral designer or the owner is like, okay, we got to pump the brakes here because we're not quite on the same page.
I think it's a really good point that you bring up, because I feel like when there's not a lot of communication on the front end on what's being worked on, sometimes as freelancers, we can go in with the expectation of being taught when the florist is actually looking for someone to just execute the work. So I think that it's really important to go in and share your strong suits on what you can and can't do and what you enjoy doing. And really I should have led with what you enjoy doing, because when you're doing a certain thing, you just get it done so quickly. So for me, I love doing personals. So I can knock out corsages, bridesmaids bouquets, like 10, 18, however many, very, very, very quickly, because I really enjoy doing it. And installations as well. I just put my AirPods on and I'm going and I'm just designing and I just finish it really quickly. So for me, I know where my strengths lie. So I ask what's requested of me. And most of the time we have a conversation before I get there. And then I find out what pieces they need. And I'm like, hey, I can do this. What do you need help with? And just communicating on the front end. I think a lot of it has to do with our relationship with the florist, because the first time you freelance with a florist as opposed to the 15th time, it's just very different. So you get to learn their style, and then you also get to share your style. And like Luann said, we're lending a talent, right? Like if we are being paid a certain rate to execute, we'll have questions on what's required and what's needed to bring the design to life. But a lot of it is resting on the talent that we have and how we work. And then if and when you have any blockages there, having the conversation with the lead designer on site, which may or may not be the business owner.
Right. I think that's a great point, because when we go out and freelance, or I should say, when I go out and freelance, I'm not always with the business owner. Sometimes I'm the lead designer on a freelance job and I'm the one that's kind of running everything. Sometimes I'm a freelancer, but there's another team member who maybe is a full-time or another freelancer for that business who I have to work with. So I think it's really important to kind of understand as a freelancer who you're going to be working with, and kind of know, what's going on ahead of time. So reaching out up front and asking for some general information and asking questions is super important. I think we did touch on this a tiny bit in our last chat. So if anybody hasn't watched that one, go back to the EveryStem blog and watch that last video about freelancing. But I think it's really important to kind of understand that we want the freelancers to be an asset for the business on both ends, right? The business owner is looking for someone who's going to be an asset to their business, and the freelancer wants to contribute. They want to be a contributor. And so I think part of it is, as business owners, we need to be able to let go a little bit and let the freelancer do the job. We need to be able to kind of say, okay, we've understood the skill level that the freelancer has enough to where we can assign them to a project that they're going to be able to complete. or maybe it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we're going to come in and we're going to, do a little bit of training and assistance and help along the way. So I think it's really important from both ends to kind of really express what the needs are, what you're looking for, and what you expect. If I'm a freelancer, let me think as a business owner. If I was owning this business, what would I need from this person? And if I'm a business owner, let me think as a freelancer. What does my freelancer need to be successful in this job? And really kind of try to make sure that you're coming from that, perspective of saying, I want to understand what this person needs. I have had people reach out to me and send me a one-line text message and say, can you work? And I've never worked for them before. I've never met them before. I don't know anything about their business. And I can choose to say, yes, and these are all my expectations, and this is what I would like to do and all that. Or I can be like, oh gosh, this is kind of really a turnoff that this person is just like sending me a one-line text message without any context or information about, what they're expecting of me or anything like that. So I think it's really important from both ends to kind of say, what would I like? How do I want to be treated? Right. I mean, that's just in any conversation, any relationship. How do I want to be treated? Let me treat that person in that same way. So I think that's really important. And I know that we're talking about freelancers as an asset. And one of the things that Valerie has said in the past is that as a business owner, you do not pay for your freelancers. I think that's really a great sentence. As a business owner, you do not pay for your freelancers. Your client pays for your freelancers. So that's really important. If we are not, as a business owner, charging enough to cover all of our expenses, including the people who need to work for that event or for that pop-up or for that week of Mother's Day sales, that's on us as the business owner. We need to make sure that we're charging enough on the front end and kind of figuring out what we need, including our labor costs, to make sure that we don't then look at our freelancers as, instead of an asset, as a liability, as something we have to pay for. Oh gosh, this person's charging me $20 an hour and I'm not getting what I need out of that. And I didn't charge enough to cover that. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, Valerie, that from your perspective, because I just think that was so impactful, from someone who runs a software company about making a profit. I think that was just a magic sentence, and it just makes so much sense, but we don't always think about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about it, I'm going to take it from the event florist perspective, because most of my work experience is working in events. And I'll say this, I have chosen to focus my efforts mainly on managing BGF, managing the space, and doing like a la carte arrangements, because personally, when I work events, I don't touch the flowers very often. Since I am producing the event and it is a production that involves a lot of different people and in all different companies, I'm focused on bringing the total vision together from the perspective of flowers, which includes linens, which includes candles, which includes votives, which includes all of the pieces that bring the final picture together. So I'll start by saying that, because when you think about labor, the client is the one who is paying for the event to come together. They are paying me to execute the event and to bring all the pieces together and to steward the event the way that they have shared their vision. But if I do not, since I will not burn myself out, I'm not going to do all the things. So they will need to pay for the labor to have everything executed. I will use my expertise to manage the budget and make sure that I am staffing accordingly, just like we do with recipes, make sure that I'm not over purchasing flowers and that I'm charging the client accordingly. I do the same thing on the staffing side. And that's one of the things that I really love about EveryStem, is that I do not have to figure it out on my own. I put in a percentage of what I want to charge for labor for that event based on the type of event that it is, and it calculates the labor for me. And then I decide how I want to allocate that amount of money to who the staff is going to be. And depending on who's going to be available to support on those days, I may have to jump in, but I'm also going to jump out because I have to look at the bigger picture. So when Luann shares about what I said earlier about not paying for not paying for the people who are working the event, she's absolutely correct. The client pays for the freelance workers. I pass that cost off to them so that they can get their vision executed. And a lot of times, sometimes they will mention, oh, I have somebody who can do this, I have somebody who can do that. Well, I have a team already in place, so you don't need to find somebody to do those things. Sometimes we will have conversations about what breakdown looks like if they want to have somebody pick up a couple things, but we pretty much take care of all the pieces from start to finish because that's what they're paying for.
Exactly. And I think that formula of understanding at the fundamental level that it's your flower costs plus your supplies plus your labor and expenses. Freelancers fall under that labor and expenses category, plus a healthy profit equals your price that you are charging the client. So really understanding what you need to charge to set that, set yourself up for that healthy price. That's really important, making that profit. So, in EveryStem, originally, we weren't showing the total amount of labor in dollars when we first created EveryStem because we were just, getting into it, starting to figure it out. And a lot of florists actually requested that. And so we added that feature. And what Valerie is talking about is on every design that you create in EveryStem, every recipe you create, you can add a percentage that goes to the labor. And then on your summary page, it's going to show you the total of how much all of those amounts of labor add up to for that event. So if you're an event florist and you've done a 30% labor on most of your designs, but you have one really big ceiling installation and you've made that a 50% labor on that recipe because you've decided you need to rent a scissor lift and you have to have a couple extra people there that day, it is going to total that up and show you, say for that event, maybe it's a $3,000 amount that you've allocated towards labor. So if you have $3,000 to spend on that labor, as Valerie said, then you can decide, okay, I have $3,000 to spend on my labor here. How many people do I need? How much are these people charging me? And how can I make this work? And you can kind of work it both ways. You can look at what people are costing. You can look at what you're allotted to spend and try to make sure over a few events that you're really hitting that on the head. Because I think what a lot of people have found is that for smaller events in particular, they are not always charging enough labor to cover those costs. If there are flips, as Valerie's saying, if you have to turn the ceremony over to a reception for strikes, and especially if it's a really, quite a bit of a drive away from where you are to where you have to go to set up this event. So don't be afraid to use a system like EveryStem. If you don't want to use EveryStem, you can do it on your own by hand. It's a lot harder. EveryStem makes it a lot simpler, but figure that math out and make sure that you're getting that calculation of what you're allocating for labor. So that way you can really start to dial in how much it's costing you, because that's a really important factor. That keeps you from burning out. It keeps you from resenting the people that you're hiring. It keeps you from resenting the client. It just keeps you in a better mental place with a mindset of, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make money on it. So I'm going to be there for the client. I'm going to go above and beyond because I know I'm making that healthy profit. And I think that's a really important piece of it. I've seen, and myself included, I am not exempt from this. I have been there in my own business. And that's one of the reasons I created EveryStem, is because I know that so many of us struggle with this, that we need to really make sure we're handling it on the front end. And so one of the other things that I think we could talk about here is that there are formalities to kind of making sure that you're hiring freelancers and that as a freelancer that you're working for florists who are going to give you that respect that you need. I know one of the questions that was asked on Instagram before the call is, how do I get paid on time as a freelancer? And I think this is such a great question because I think almost everybody who's worked as a freelancer maybe has been burned by someone as a florist who isn't paying them on time. If you are a business owner, pay your freelancers on time, please. Like, that is important. Those people are helping you to get your job done, helping you to build a reputation of a reliable business, helping you to execute your vision. And so the least that you can do is pay them on time, and kind of being clear on what that is. What is on-time payment to you as a business owner? And what is on-time payment to you as a freelancer? Have those conversations on the front end. And I can see Valerie kind of nodding. So what do you think about that, Valerie? What would you like to add to that?
I think it goes back to working on building a relationship and finding out what the company's existing pay schedule is. Because I have worked with freelancers who pay the next day, who pay the same night, who pay within 7 days, who pay within 2 weeks. That's a really good question to ask on a front end. And you can certainly ask it, because a lot of times if you don't, you'll find out that it might not align with what you had in mind. And then at that point, you'd already completed their service and you're not able to have the communication or the conversation about what on-time payment looks like. So that's the first thing, is you want to find out if they can accommodate your rate and how they distribute payment, because that's another one. Sometimes it's Cash App, sometimes it's Zelle, sometimes it's a paper check, sometimes it's an existing HR platform, sometimes it's your bank account. Like, I've been paid in so many different ways that now it's almost innate that I ask, hey, how will the payment be distributed? What do you need from me? Because you want to assume the onus. You don't want to put anything else more on the florist. So ask them, what do you need from me for this payment? Or when can I expect this payment? And then they'll let you know, and you can decide if that works for you or not.
And I think it's also important to look at from the business owner perspective. I don't know of any florists who go and deliver an event without getting paid upfront. If you are a floral designer, number one lesson: payment comes before delivery for any event that you're going to deliver. That's very important, because unfortunately in our world, I know a lot of companies and a lot of businesses will charge like after the fact. They'll invoice, 30 days, and they expect you. If you're working with a large corporation, or you're working with, I used to do a lot of events for the University of Texas, as I was mentioning earlier, in Austin here. Now, with the University of Texas, there were a couple of different colleges that I set up a relationship with, where I would invoice them and they would pay within 30 days. That was a very specific, agreement that I had set up. But in general, anyone watching this who's getting into floral design or isn't currently handling their business this way, you should really be charging and getting payment in full at least a month or 2 weeks before the event. That's really key. And so I think it's very important for freelancers to understand that the florist is getting paid. And so you asking to be paid is expected, right? So the freelancer needs to be the person who sends the invoice with their hours, saying, and their rate, this is what I need to be paid, in a timely fashion. And then the business owner should also, in a timely fashion, then confirm those hours and then pay the payment. So I think that's really important to understand. That's kind of the process, that the freelancer is the one that requests payment. So if you ever work for someone who doesn't really bring up how that's handled, it's totally in your lane to go ahead and send the invoice and then expect, and you can say, let me know, what's the process of being paid up front. Because I've actually worked with people before who have like emailed me or messaged me after we've freelanced for someone and said, hey, Luann, are we supposed to get paid for this? And I'm like, yes, of course we get paid for this. And you should be asking that on the front end, and you should be asking that to the business owner or the person who's in charge of hiring you. So I think, I'm laughing, but it happens more than we would like it to happen. So we need to make sure that we're really communicating those things And don't be afraid to ask those questions. If you're a freelancer, you're trying to get more experience, don't be shy. And if you don't hear back from a florist in their busy season, like Valerie was saying, it's the holidays for a retail florist, they might not be able to get back to you right then. But maybe introduce yourself in the off season and say, hey, I'd like to come in, see what your business is like, and hopefully freelance for you when you need somebody for the next busy season. So that kind of leads us to the idea of having a more formal guideline or contract for freelancing. And I think this is really important. And we have two very generous members of EveryStem who are experienced floral designers and business owners who have been willing to share their templates and guidelines for working with freelancers. And I'm going to go ahead and share that after this call. So if anybody wants that information, just pop your email in the chat and I'll go ahead and make sure to send you the links to these. The first person is Ashley Fox. She owns Ashley Fox Designs. And she's been doing amazing floral designs for many years. And she has a guideline for floral designers who come in to freelance for her. It's not really a contract, but it's more of her expectations, what she thinks needs to happen, kind of guiding the freelancers so that they understand what she expects. And then she also, every season, at the beginning of the season, she kind of plans out her freelance schedule and hires her freelancers early in the season. And then she has kind of a day where she brings all the freelancers in and she introduces them to each other, to her team, to her studio, and kind of goes over some of the things about freelancing. I think they make some boutonnieres and they have a little pizza party. So that's kind of a really great idea if you're interested as a business owner to kind of get your freelancers together. Planning ahead on the front end is so important, kind of figuring out a schedule. I used to do my schedule for the season probably a month. So in Austin, we have kind of spring and fall are really busy wedding seasons. And so we used to kind of do probably in January, and then again for the spring season, and then again in, I guess I'd say like maybe August for the fall season. And we would sit down as a team and we would plan out what each wedding looked like. Did this person book? Are they finalized? What do we need to do? How many people do we need for this team? Who are we going to ask to work? Who's going to do the strike? And we would do that all at the beginning of the season. We're not asking people to freelance 3 days before the event. We're not, asking people to jump in at the last minute to do a strike at midnight. And if we have some people who kind of fall out or a wedding pops up, of course, we're going to have things book throughout the season. Not everything is booked in January for, April through May, but we want to do everything that we've already got booked. We want to kind of have a plan for. And that way the freelancers can understand that there's an expectation from the business owner of, unless you're ill, you have a family emergency, or you have like a really, really good reason, we really expect you to be reliable and show up. And that way they can get it on their calendar and plan their lives around it. Because I think a lot of times when business owners ask for freelancers at the last minute, it becomes a schedule conflict. And they're like, oh, maybe I can do that, but I might have promised to somebody else that I could do something else. And then it becomes like a conflict of interest. So the earlier you can do that, the better. Planning out your season as much as you can ahead of time is really important. So I'll email that from Ashley. And then from Jerry Lynn at Flux Floral, who is a member of Black Girl Florists, and I know Valerie has freelanced for her in the past, she has generously shared with us her contract for freelancers, which is amazing. And I'm just going to look at it because I want to make sure I'm not messing anything up. But she has several categories that she goes over in this contract that I think are very interesting. And I think she got this through through Florist Society, one of their bundles. So she kind of adapted it to her business. And it's a time tracking, kind of understanding who's tracking the time of the freelancer and how they're going to do that. that it's their responsibility as a freelancer to track their time, and that, you know, the work is actually spent on the job performing the assigned duties. So it's really important to understand, you know, setting those expectations up front. Jerry Lynn is amazing at that. She used to be a CPA, so she's very organized, which I love. And she uses EveryStem to kind of add notes into her recipes to let people know. She uses it to add her timelines in. And I know she does some things in Honeybook as well. So she's using systems to really organize her business so that when freelancers come in, they are very clearly defined parameters. And she's explaining it without even having to verbally explain everything. She's got it all written out for people. The next section is payment. Oh, just what we were talking about. She's laying it out for people ahead of time. This is how we're going to handle payment. This is when you be expected to receive payment. And she even gives people an option. She prefers Zelle. So, you know, she's letting them know right up front, hey, this is how I like to pay you. If you can't be paid that way, let me know. Then the next section is confidentiality. And I think this is something we haven't hit on. So maybe we'll come back to this after I go over the rest of this contract and Valerie can speak to it a little bit. I once had a freelancer who was trying to use some of the pictures of her work that she was doing for my business to start her own business. She wasn't tagging for being a floral design in these images. She was saying she made them and she did all the work. And I think that's a little misleading, right? We want to tag the business that we're working for. We want to make sure that it's clear that we were freelancing for that company when we're sharing pictures of our work. And honestly, there's no harm in asking the designer, hey, how do you feel about this? I'm trying to build my own business. I want to give you the respect you deserve and that we have a good relationship. Are you cool with me sharing these images? Do I need to say made while freelancing for? How do I do that? And so Jerry Lynn is really clearly like laying that out. And she's saying, I expect you to be ethical. I expect you to be self-directed and, you know, make sure that we're not sharing, you know, private information about my business with other people. I think that's very common sense, but if you lay it out, you can't go back and the person say, well, you never said anything. Yes, I told you that up front and it's very clear. So I think that's really important. And then the last one that she has is the environment at Flux Floral, which I think is super important. Like we all have different vibes. We all have different ways of working. And I think kind of making it an environment where the freelancer is enjoying themselves, obviously is going to be a lot better. And then the last page that she has, I think is really cool. She has kind of like some information about the design day details or the prep day details. So if they're working on a certain day, what to bring, what to wear, is she providing lunch? You know, what time are you going to be, you know, loading out and all those kind of things. So if anybody wants that, I see a bunch of emails here. I'm going to go ahead and screenshot all these. I will send you links to both Jerry Lynn's form and Ashley's form. And, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to them and say, hey, thanks so much for sharing this, because I think it's super cool that they are willing to share these things that they've created just for the benefit of everyone in our floral community. So thanks to both of them. And Valerie, what do you think about that? And in specific, the confidentiality part, I think is really important for us to kind of consider. And I'd love to get your idea on that. As a freelancer and as somebody who now owns kind of a place where florists are working together, how do you feel about that confidentiality and how do you handle that as a freelancer yourself?
I think it was spot on what Jerry put on the agreement. I think the most important thing when it comes to confidentiality is just being open and honest, right? I think that part of the issue is that some of these conversations are not being had ahead of time, are not being had ahead of time. So a lot of us as florists, we don't really know what our role is. So having an agreement like this, where you're sharing what your expectations are of the people that are working with you, it makes it easier for them to engage with your business. So letting them know, you know, how do you want to be tagged when you share? You know, how do you want to be paid? What is your expectation of me when I'm on site? What is the expectation when I'm sharing images? Because you are sharing your talent And you want to be able to leverage and use those images. You just want to do it, like G said, in an ethical manner where you're being open. I know whenever I freelance for a florist, I always tag them as the creative director and lead designer. And then I tag myself as the freelance florist so that they understand that I contributed to the designs, but the vision and the idea was of someone else.
I love that. That's great. If anybody has any questions, now would be a great time. Either pop them in the chat or you can unmute, let us know what you're thinking. And we can kind of, there's one more thing that I know there was another question that I had here that I want to talk about. Someone asked about non-competes as a floral freelancer. And so I think this is really interesting. I've had a couple different people ask me about this over the years, but one of the questions we got on Instagram when I asked about freelancing in specific is about non-competes. And I think that it's really important to understand the difference between like an agreement and a guideline and a non-compete. If you have a freelancer working for you or you're a freelancer working for someone, you really can't enact a non-compete because that kind of goes against the general relationship of the way it works. You're an independent contractor and you're coming in to execute a certain project or job for this person. So I think it's really important to not feel like it has to be kind of a conflict or that we're trying to like lock someone into this legal kind of arrangement. And I'm in Texas. I've had people in the past try to enforce non-competes that are more corporate floral design businesses. And friends of mine have worked for them. And I know for a fact in the state of Texas that it almost, if it gets to a point of legal action, that the freelancer or the employee tends to actually win in a lot of these non-compete cases because it's very hard for a business to say, like, you can only work here when you're not working full-time and being paid all those hours, right? And even as a full-time employee, it can be very hard for a business when it goes to that final step, if it has to get to a court of law of saying this person agreed to a non-compete, it can only last, while they're working. They can't have it continue afterwards and things like that. So I think, the important thing is to have that mindset of, instead of, if you've had some bad experiences or you've been burned in the past, instead of looking at it as like, I have to lock this person into this legal agreement, have a more of an open conversation and try to make it more of a win-win kind of experience where, like Ashley or Jerry Lynn, they're putting all those expectations out up front and they're really being open and honest. And that way it kind of can lead the freelancer to any questions that they have, right? If you're a newer designer, you might not think of all of these things off the top of your head because you don't have as much experience. So looking at some of these things as a freelancer perspective and saying, oh, okay, well, these are some experienced designers who have kind of set these parameters in place for a reason. Let me think about how I can apply that to the next time I go freelance, or how I can apply that to what I'm offering, as kind of a one-page document when I'm trying to, email business owners and say, this is what I want to offer when I'm freelancing.
I think that's a good point that you make, Luann. I think that the non-compete, it's just this idea that we have ownership over other people is very self-destructive. And I'm like anti-competition. So like for me, it's almost like very foreign that people would think that they have agency over someone else's talent because of them working together. I think what we need to understand is that, and this is in all areas of life, right? We are only responsible for ourselves. You may work with the freelancer or with the florist one time, you may work 5 times. Nothing is guaranteed. The only thing that is guaranteed is how we operate in our businesses and what we do and how we set the stage for florists to come and work for us. When you pay people on time, they'll come back. When you have everything ready for them to work, they'll come back. When they're in an environment that's open and they feel like they have the space to design, they'll come back. When they have the tools to design, they'll come back. When they're treated with respect and fed lunch, they'll come back. Your responsibility is to set the stage, not to keep the person here. And that is a word for every single area in your life, with relationships, with friendships, with how you carry your work. You want to be sure that you're doing your part, because we can't control if someone's available or not. And this piece is particularly very close to me, because I had to end a friendship with the florist a couple years ago because of that very thing. I connected with a couple different florists and we started working together. She did not like that. This did not impede their relationship, and it expanded everyone's relationships. Like, there are so many people that were blessed and supported by my connection to this florist. And I think the other florist did not like that. So it ended and it resulted in us not working together anymore. But when you think about the work that you're doing, and I say this all the time, you cannot do this type of work in floral on your own. You can't, whether it's retail, whether it's events, whether it's niche installation work, you will need to work with others, whether they are florists, setup crew, breakdown, because if you do, you won't be in this business very long. So it behooves you to work and develop your business and make sure that you are having the things in line so that you attract the business that you want to receive. And not that you're in a position where you have to send anybody a non-compete. If anyone sends me a non-compete, they don't even have to send it. We don't have to work together anymore, because the principle of collaboration is not there, and they're operating out of a space of lack, and I can't function there, because I'm a very open person, very communicative, and I believe in working with others, and I believe in giving other people opportunities. And sometimes that means that, my role changes with the relationship, and I'm okay with that, because I understand what was happening in that moment, and we were able to get the events done. But yeah, so just a little bit of experience there with what I kind of went through. But all in all, I love being able to connect other florists to other florists to work together, because that's what we're here for, to share our talent with one another.
Yeah, I think sharing our talents is amazing, because when I first started as a floral designer, I did not have a really great network of people. I met a few other floral designers that were in Austin. They had been established for a long time, and I'm coming in. I bought my business. It was already existing from the previous owner. And so when I came in, people who owned other flower shops in Austin were not very friendly. They did not want to communicate. They did not really want to share. I kind of had to lean on some of the wholesalers who were more friendly, who maybe had owned flower shops in the past, and they were kind of willing to help. And then eventually, things started to shift, and there were new people coming into the industry, and now it's so much more of a collaborative kind of mentality of kind of sharing what we know and sharing our talents. And so I think it's really important to just kind of keep that perspective of saying, if you feel uncomfortable about something isn't going the way you want it to go, whether you're the freelancer or the business owner. I think one of the biggest things that we struggle with is just saying what we need to say, just kind of getting it out there in that business relationship. It's awkward. We're kind of like, oh gosh, I really want to tell this person that this is not what I was expecting, or I'm really nervous about having to do this thing that I am asked to do that I am not really feeling like my skills are up to this level. Or as the business owner, oh gosh, I asked this person to start on this project and they went off and started doing something totally different. Being able to say those things very quickly, upfront, honestly, and getting everybody back on track and kind of refocusing is really a great way to just kind of keep things moving along. I think when we let things start to build, we don't communicate what we need to say, then it can become an issue. And I know recently I was freelancing for someone here in Austin, and another freelancer is making all these designs, and we're going through, I think we had 2 or 3 different weddings to make designs for. And I'm kind of the kind of florist who watches everything around me as I design, because I used to own my own business. So I've made it my, kind of one of my little, I don't know, I don't know if it's a talent or a curse, but I'm always watching everything that's going on as I'm working. So I can kind of see that this other freelancer is not doing the design the way the business owner would probably like it. It looks very different than what everything else is being made around us. And nothing was said. We go through the whole day. And then the next morning I show up to help start load. And the designer's like, oh, the business owner's like, I'm exhausted. I spent all night redoing that person's work because that person didn't do the way I wanted it to do. Now, that's on that business owner. That business owner needs to communicate, hey, let's take a look at this. And one of the things that I would recommend is a lot of the people that I work for, and when I used to own my business, or if I do an event, now, and I have somebody come and help me, have them make something and then show it to you and say, okay, let's do the first one together, or I'll make a sample. You make, we have to make 20 of these centerpieces. I'm going to make one, show you what I want it to look like, which I think is really helpful if the person isn't normally doing your style. You make the first one, show it to me. We'll tweak it if we need to, and then we'll move on. And so I think that's really important. Don't let a freelancer go all day, or as a freelancer, don't go all day afraid to ask, hey, is this what you want? Show it to the person that's in charge. Is this what you're looking for? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Let them give you the feedback. Don't take it personally. Take it as a constructive criticism, and then work through that, because it's so much better than having to spend an entire night redoing somebody's work. Certainly that freelancer that was not that person's intention, but because they weren't getting any feedback, they just kept plowing through, and the business owner did not, really communicate. So I think that's a really good example of, don't be afraid to just say what you need to say and find the right words. Hey, I just want to let you know, you can give them the, what do they call it? A crap sandwich, excuse my French. Say something really good, then tell them the not so good, and then say something else really good. Kind of put the bad part in the middle. But I think that's kind of a good example of just saying, don't be afraid to say the things that you need to say. So we're just about at an hour. I don't want to keep you all much longer. Does anybody have any questions for Valerie about freelancing from the business owner perspective? I know many of you are business owners that are live on the call. Was this helpful for everybody? Put a little yes or a heart in the chat if you liked it. Flora's giving me the thumbs up. Thank you, Flora. Robin, thank you for being here. Candace. Yes, very helpful. Okay, great. I'll send out those two the two documents that our EveryStem members are sharing, and I'll make sure that Valerie has a copy of those as well, so she can share them. Valerie, any last thoughts or any last things that you want to share with the group before we call it a day?
Yeah, sure. For me, freelancing has really helped to just develop my talent, period. I feel like for me, other than formal training and YouTube University, I've really been able to grow my skills in freelancing. And it's been really great because even in the off seasons, I'm able to help other florists with their year-round events, or going to different cities where they might have events in the summer, as opposed to Georgia where we don't because it's really hot. So I just want you to remember that the way that you work with flowers is a trade. You have a trade. You will always be able to make money for yourself forever and ever, and amen, because people love and want flowers. You can decide how you want to work with flowers at any time of your life. There have been seasons where I've been just retail, where I've done just events, and now it's just freelance, but that can change at any time, because what you do and in how you work, that's something that is innate. That's your talent. That's not going to go away. It's only going to develop. So really, really push yourself to find new and different ways to work with flowers.
I love that. That's so great, Valerie. Knowing that, as a florist, I do feel like I kind of went out on a limb creating EveryStem, this software. It's kind of a weird thing for a florist to go and start a software company. But I knew that if it didn't work out, I could always go back to doing floral more often. And I still love the fact that I can freelance. I'm freelancing this weekend and the following 2 weekends. And it gives me a lot of opportunity to still have my hands in flowers, to really do what I love, to connect with other florists, and to kind of just stay involved with the local Austin floral community. So I think there are so many advantages to being a freelance designer. And even if you do own your own business, if you can get out and freelance once in a while for other florists, I think it just gives a lot of opportunity to see we all do a lot of the same things, but sometimes we do them in a different way. And so I've been a florist for over 15 years, but I am still constantly learning when I freelance for different florists. And I love that. So don't be shy about kind of the trade or trying different things. And looking at it from like a different perspective can also be really helpful. So trying to look at, if you're a business owner, trying to look at it from that freelancer perspective. And if you're a freelancer, looking at it from the business owner perspective and trying to find that win-win in kind of making freelancing a little bit more of a formal relationship, so that way we can all really set the expectations up front and everybody has a really great experience throughout the whole process. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Valerie, you can go to Black Girl Florists, or you can go to Pink and Blooms. I highly recommend you start following her there. What she is doing in Atlanta for the floral community is amazing, and I love it so much. I'm so excited to get my feet in the door when I come visit. Thank you,
And
Valerie.
I dropped a link, Luann. I dropped a link. It's a freelance link with Black Girl Florist. So if anybody ever is available to freelance or has an opportunity and you need help, please go there. I share it with the entire membership, and they make the connections if you guys want to work together.
Awesome. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen into this conversation and participate. I'll go ahead and email everybody on the list the 2 documents. I'll add the link to blackgirlflorist.com/freelance. So if you haven't signed up for that, you can. And if anybody has any questions, you can reach me at luann@everystem.com, or you can reach Valerie. I believe her email is info@blackgirlflorist.com. Thank you, guys, and I hope everybody has a great day.